What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So, to be honest, like most Americans, I don't know anything about all this. But apparently, this is a very important part of Canada's constitution that protects people's basic rights and freedoms. So it says here this was enacted in 1982 by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. 1982? That's really, really recent, isn't it? This was put into place like 40 years ago? That's like nothing. What you guys have before this, like in the 80s? Without your Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it seems, pretty important. I imagine you had something else, like the Canadian Constitution and stuff like that, but I guess my first reaction would be to say, I'm shocked that this is such a recent document. Wow. So today, I thought it'd be really, really interesting to try to understand some of these rights that Canadians have and maybe compare some of this stuff to what we have here in the United States, because you better believe that we were never taught any of this stuff in school. They didn't cover this. So let's take a look here. This document is pretty massive with a lot of different parts to it. This is the actual technical document right here. But I managed to find a web page that has a condensed version that just really lies everything out and outlines everything very simply. So even, an American like me can probably understand. So let's take a look at this, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So starting with section 1 here, it says, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Oh my God, this is like you got to go to law school to understand some of this stuff. But from what I'm getting here, this is basically talking about how every Canadian has the guarantee of all of these rights and freedoms in this document. And the only limitation to that is if, by using law, you can argue and demonstrate in a free and democratic society, like demonstrate in like the open court of free law, that something in this charter doesn't apply or is not correct. Or it reminds me honestly of here in the United States when sometimes they have to argue in court cases that something is not protected by the Constitution, or that the Constitution doesn't apply to something, or certain rights, or that's the Constitution didn't mean something technically, that kind of stuff. That's basically what Canada is saying here, which I think is a good thing. Like, goodness gracious, there should be those that wiggle room, like where in the future, like we are now, years later, where something in this charter that was made, 40 years ago, if something now you need to argue whether something applies or what it means, or you can do that if you do it lawfully and demonstrate it and like to be absolutely true in the court of law. Anyway, let's keep going. That's a bit in the weeds right there. Number 2, fundamental freedoms. Now we're talking. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. Okay, what freedoms do Canadians have? A, the freedom of conscience and religion. What is the freedom of conscience? I guess that's saying the freedom to determine your own conscience, your own morals and ethics, what you consider to be conscientious. You're free to choose that for yourself, what's right and wrong. And religion, yes, very good. The freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression. Wow. This reminds me of, in the U.S. Constitution, the freedom of speech. But you guys actually get a little more detailed about it. You could, like, you don't say freedom of speech. You're more specific. Freedom of thought and beliefs and opinions and expression. I like that, actually. That's a little more detailed. Including freedom of the press and other media. Yes, very good. Freedom of peaceful assembly, very important. And freedom of association, very good. Just to make comparisons, to the United States, because that's what I know. That's what I was taught in school. A lot of this stuff is extremely comparable and extremely important. And yeah, it's really cool to see that in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right, Section 3, Democratic Rights. Now it's getting juicy. The democratic rights of citizens. What are your democratic rights? Every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election. Of the House of Commons. Sure, that is certainly a perk of being a citizen of anywhere, you would think. Maximum duration of legislative bodies, that's covered in this. No House of Commons or Legislative Assembly shall continue for longer than 5 years from the date fixed for the return. Okay, talking about term limits. Continuation of special circumstances? Oh, this is like actually come into effect in other countries like Ukraine, where they have put off having an election in times of war to keep things like the continuity of like the current leader and keep things simple like that. In a time of real or apprehended war. There you go, exactly what I thought. Invasion or insurrection. A House of Commons may be continued by Parliament and a Legislative Assembly may be continued beyond 5 years, if such continuation is not opposed by the votes of more than 1/3 of the members of the House of Commons. So, in times of war or chaos, insurrection, invasion, the government is in such a state of it's an emergency and the government needs to function, and it's hard to do that when the government's literally changing and ending. And I don't know, sometimes you need that to happen, but it seems like a lot of different countries agree that in these types of times, it's best to just keep things how they are until the peril is over. But Canada has this caveat that if 1/3 of the House of Commons votes against that, then it actually won't even happen, which is really nice. Annual sitting of legislative bodies, there shall be a sitting of Parliament and of each legislator at least every 12 months. Cool. Mobility rights. What is a mobility right? I'm not really sure what that even means. Every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. Ooh, I like this. Literally mobility, how you're allowed to move and exist and where you can go. I'm actually not sure if in the US Constitution, if it is explicitly stated that we have the right to enter, remain, leave the United States at our own free will. I don't know if it explicitly says that. That's pretty important. Rights to move and gain livelihood. Every citizen of Canada and every person who has the status of a permanent resident of Canada has the right to move and take up residence in any province. Yeah, okay, so you can freely move throughout Canada into any province that you want. There's no restriction on that. And to pursue the gaining of a livelihood in any province. To work in any province. There's no restriction on that. As long as you're a citizen or permanent resident, you can go anywhere in Canada and live and work. Very good, yeah. I'm pretty sure, again, I don't know if that's stated in the U.S. Constitution, but you can go to any state and work and live, and yeah, it's good that these things are stated explicitly, though. Limitations. Ooh, the right specified in subsection 2 are subject to any laws or practices of general application and force. It's no offense. It's not the Canadian Constitution that is putting me to sleep. Any legal government document, I swear, has stuff like this. It's just talking about exceptions to that law. Affirmative action programs. Okay, more subsections 2 and 3 do not preclude any law that has its object to the amelioration in a province. It's talking about socially or economically disadvantaged people and making sure that they're acknowledged here and not screwed over. Legal rights, life, liberty, and security of person. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. That's funny how that's so close to the American life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is guaranteed. In Canada, it's life, liberty, and security. What's more important? The pursuit of happiness or being secure? They're both very important. Fundamentally, you can't pursue happiness unless your life is secure. That might be fundamentally more important, like if you know the hierarchy of needs, the first thing you need as like an animal or a human, we are animals, is like shelter and food. Then you can worry about happiness. Canada might have like struck a more fundamental sort of chord here. And the right to not be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. So you can be deprived of life, liberty, and security if you are interfering with the principles of justice. So, which makes sense. Like, search and seizure. Everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure. I don't know what the definition of unreasonable is, but we have something very similar in the American Constitution to that. Everyone has the right to not be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned. Again, I don't know what arbitrarily means or how loosely or strict that is. You always wonder, right? Arrest or detention. Everyone has the right on arrest or detention to be informed of the reasons that they are. Oh, I like this is interesting. So if you're in Canada and you are arrested by the police, you have the right to be informed why you are under arrest. That's very important. And retain and instruct counsel without delay and to be informed of that right. I like these a lot. In America, you have the right to like remain silent, the right to an attorney, a lawyer, the right to make a phone call, the right to remain silent if you don't want to speak. I like this right to be informed why you are under arrest. I like that a lot. You have the right to the validity of the detention determined by way of habeas corpus and be released if the detention is not lawful. I forget what habeas corpus means, but I've heard that before. Proceedings in criminal and penal matters. Any person charged with an offense has the right to be informed without delay of the offense, what it is, tried in a reasonable time. That's becoming more and more important because in America, it can take like years for certain cases to go to court. Years. Reasonable time to be tried. I agree with that. Not be compelled to be a witness in proceedings against the person in respect of the offense. So they can't call you to be a witness against yourself, I think, incriminate yourself. You are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Love that. We have that exact same thing. Not to be denied reasonable bail. Yep. With this section about being arrested in Canada, these are all extremely similar to the United States, actually. Except in the case of offense under military law. Then you might be held without bail, I guess, where it could be 5 years. Jeez. Not to be found guilty on account of any act or omission unless it constituted an offense under the Canadian law. If you have to violate a Canadian law to be held accountable for an offense of the Canadian law. If finally acquitted of the offense, not to be tried again, and if found guilty and punished, not to be punished again. I like that. That makes total sense. If found guilty of the offense and the punishment of the offense has been varied between the time of commission and the time of sentencing to the benefit of the lesser punishment. Wow, if they come up with different punishments in your specific case, and it has changed, you get the lesser one. Wow. Treatment or punishment. Everyone has the right to not be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. We have that exact same one, and that's very important. No cruel and unusual punishment. That's what separates our countries, our government, and our way of life from barbarians. Self-crimination. A witness who testifies in any proceedings has the right to not give incriminating evidence, like against yourself, self-incriminating. You can have an interpreter. Okay, and we're moving on to equality rights. Equal before and under law. Equal protection and benefit of law. Very important that every single person, no matter what, is equal and covered by the law. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit without discrimination based on race, ethnicity, nationality, color, religion, sex, age, ability. Perfect. Love it. Yes. Yes. Affirmative action programs. Taking care of those that are disadvantaged. Yep. Official languages of Canada. Do we even have a section like this in America? In our Constitution? I don't know. Because we just have English. English and French. It's in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Official languages of Canada. Equal status, equal rights. And that's why you guys literally have French on all the packaging, right? Signs and stuff, right? I think you have to have English and French. They are considered equal under your law. Cool. There's a section about New Brunswick. New Brunswick. Shout out. You got your own spot in the Constitution. English and French are the official languages of New Brunswick and have equality of status and equal rights. I don't know why that deserved its own little spot, but there you go. Advancements of status. Nothing in this charter limits the authority of Parliament or legislator to advance the equality of status of France. Okay. There's a lot of protections around the dual language thing, which is obviously very, very important in Canadian culture. English and French linguistic communities in New Brunswick? So I don't know what strings New Brunswick is pulling here, but they got a lot of extra screen time, like in this charter. But good for you guys. I'm sure it's important. I guess New Brunswick is very, very, like, dual language. Proceedings in Parliament. Everyone has the right to use French, English, or French in any debate in Parliament. No kidding. From the videos I've seen, it feels like in Canada the Parliament is speaking in English, unless it was like the Parliament in Quebec or something, right? More New Brunswick stuff. Parliamentary statutes. The statutes, records, and journals of Parliament shall be printed and published in English and French. Yes, make those records public. Excellent. English or French may be used in any person, in any pleadings or processing. Wow. So anything having to do with the government in Canada. If you're in a court case, if you're in the government debating, you can speak in English or French. That is your legal right. Geez, does everyone in the government have to speak English and French? Then, how does that work? What if you're debating someone and you don't speak French? Or how does that work? I don't know. Communications by public with federal institutions. Any member of the public in Canada has the right to communicate with and receive available services from any head or central office of an institution of the Parliament or Government of Canada. So any public member of Canada can use the services of the government, is what it's saying, I think. More New Brunswick. Why does New Brunswick get its own special constitution thing? Anyway, rights and privileges. Nothing in sections 16 to 20 abrogates or derogates. No idea what this means. Minority language educational rights. Citizens of Canada whose first language learned and still understood is that of English or French, linguistic minority, in the province where they reside, who have received their primary school instruction in Canada in English or French and reside in a province where the language in which they receive that instruction is the language of English or French, have the right to have their children receive primary and secondary school instruction in that language. If you speak English, your kids can learn in English. If you learned French, speak French, you have the right for your kids to speak French in school. A lot of special protections and clarifications on the language in Canada. We don't have any of this stuff in America. It's quite a bit more simple for us. I never even realized that. Interesting stuff though. Continuity of language instruction. Any child who received can have so you get to learn in the language that you prefer and that you have grown up with. I think that's what that's saying. The right of citizens under Canada, under subsections 1 and 2, a lot of language stuff. Wow. Cool though, important. Enforcement. Anyone whose rights or freedoms as guaranteed by this charter have been infringed or denied may apply to a court to obtain a remedy. Yeah, I mean, if any of the rights guaranteed here, like if they're denied to you as a Canadian citizen, you can complain and go to court, of course. Yes, it's good that that's in there. Exclusion of evidence bringing administration of justice. You need to have evidence, I guess, for that kind of dispute. General. Aboriginal rights and freedoms not affected by this charter. Whoa, Aboriginal rights and freedoms. Wow. I don't, in the American Constitution, I guarantee you, we don't say anything about the Native Americans, the original inhabitants of the United States. This charter guarantee freedoms will not take away from the Aboriginal Treaty or other rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. Good for Canada. Wow, you guys really go out of your way for like the native Canadians, the original Canadian inhabitants. It's all over your constitution. That's really cool and very thoughtful, honestly, and you know, ethically good, by the way. What else here? A lot of this charter shall be interpreted with the lens of multicultural heritage of Canadians. I guarantee you that's not in the American Constitution. It's guaranteed to both sexes. Yeah, to all territories. Oh, the application of this charter. This charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respect. Yeah, it applies to Canada. Yeah, this is like kind of the unnecessary. This charter applies to Yes, it's called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We know. Exceptions, 5-year limits, okay, and a citation. And more rights for the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. Wow. Good for you guys. This was fascinating. Holy cow. And this is just a part of the Canadian Constitution, right? This is really cool. I guess this was kind of like compare it to the American Bill of Rights and our amendments and those things. There was a lot of parallels here. But in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you guys have a lot of extra stuff. A lot of really good extra stuff and a little different wording of certain things that I actually really liked. Like that free speech part, except instead of speech, you guys said freedom of thought, belief, opinions, expression. I like that kind of stuff. It's cool seeing like another country's sort of constitution and your rule of law, because you know us Americans we don't really learn about that stuff. So that was dense. That was a lot of information, but I really enjoyed it. So anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, anything you thought about this, or that'd be cool to hear about, especially if you're Canadian. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and seeing Canadian things I've never seen before. Feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.